This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1776, introducing Sons of the Revolution.
Who's strong and brave here to save the American way? Who vows to fight like a man for what's right night and day? Who will campaign door to door for America? Carry the flag shore to shore for America. From Hoboken to Spokane, the Star-Spangled Banner will flag.
I'm Adam Brito.
I'm Ian Levinstein.
And I'm Chris Everly.
Who picked the crown to Japan? The Star-Spangled Man
Wow.
Keep 'em flying.
America. Oh, man.
Ian, that was an inspired selection, sir. That was an
Choice.
inspired selection.
Thank you much. And talk about timing. Because, friends, we did not do this on purpose.
Pure synchronicity.
Just the way we like it. Episode 1776 happens to come out right around the weekend of July 4th, so we deliver.
And I think we should pay tribute to Murd, as this was his idea.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I would give some credit to Ian. I mean, it was his original idea. He's the one who pointed out to us that episode 1776 was on the horizon, and we should probably do something patriotic.
True.
In observance. I just kind of filled in the blanks from there.
Deemer was the first one who pointed out it was going to be 1776, so technically it falls on the founder, but I will take the credit.
Well, then, tri-cornered hats off to the founding father as well.
Exactly. And this episode will be an introducing of three characters that very much lend themselves to the beginning of this fine nation. Mm-hmm. And Murd, who are those individuals?
Well, they are, in chronological order of first appearance in comics, Will Eisner's Quality Comics version of Uncle Sam, the Jack Kirby created Revolutionary War era Captain America, and the Black Coat from Ape Entertainment in the 2000s.
Yes, indeed. Fantastic picks all around, sir. And these were the first times that I read any of the material for this introducing.
Excellent.
Yeah, the only one I had read prior was Black Coat, and it had been so long that it was a pleasure to return to it. 'Cause I'd really forgotten the story. Not that I don't mean that disparagingly. It's just been so many years ago that it was a treat to look it over again.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And all of these stories are available easily enough online. The corresponding Captain America stories, essentially all three of them that we're going to be discussing on this episode, are all available online in one way or another. The Captain America stuff is on Marvel Unlimited, and then you can very easily find National Comics #1 in one form or another on a whole bunch of different websites that have cataloged it over the years. And the first issue of the Black Coat is available for free as well online. So that's very, very easy for everybody to read along this episode.
Indeed.
Okay, so shall we begin at the beginning with the oldest of the characters?
And this is the one I was most excited about, only because I've always considered Murd, a bit of an authority on the Uncle Sam concept, this character in comics. And I'd totally forgotten that Will Eisner created the concept. So I'm really Jones for this discussion in particular.
Okay, well, let's fingers crossed I don't disappoint.
Impossible, Murd, impossible.
Now,
all right. Go ahead, Ian.
No. I was just going to point out real quick before we get started with the actual story is I'm impressed on how many panels they were able to fit on every single page of this issue, because almost every single one of them has 3, 6, 9, at least a 12-panel layout, which I am not used to at all, and that is golden age right there.
It sure is. It's Will Eisner. It's the golden age, baby.
Yep, no such thing as decompression back in 1940.
Mm-hmm. Heck yeah.
Now, Murd, one thing I wanted to ask right off the bat, the Uncle Sam character we're looking at here in National Comics #1, there's a continuity from that character to the character we've seen with the Freedom Fighters and so forth, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is the Quality Comics version of Uncle Sam. It's conceived of by Will Eisner as kind of a superhero figure. Obviously, Will Eisner didn't create Uncle Sam as a concept. Right. He was the first to bring into comics as a crime fighter or superhero. And yes, he appeared in Quality Comics for about 45 issues of National Comics and also a short run of his own solo series in the Golden Age before disappearing for a while. And it is, to answer your question, Chris, this is the version of Uncle Sam that DC ultimately acquired and brought into the DC universe in the early 70s as part of the newly created super team, the Freedom Fighters.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the Freedom Fighters were always on Earth X battling the Nazis, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's right.
1940s Quality Comics group characters all.
Fantastic.
The first thing I noticed about this that struck me was that the copyright was July 1940. And I forgot, in the Golden Age, do we know how many months ahead they were on the covers? Was it 1 or 2? I don't think it was as much as it would be later on.
Oh, no, certainly not.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that they had figured that trick out yet at that point. I mean, this might actually have hit stands in July of 1940, for all I know.
Okay. Someone can correct us if you listen on that in the forums or Facebook. But be that as it may, what struck me was that obviously World War II was raging at this point in Europe. The United States, of course, was not involved in the war yet beyond aid to Britain. We were not officially a belligerent yet. But at this point, like in July 1940, Hitler's already conquered Western Europe.
Right.
With the exception of Britain. France had fallen in June of that year, for example. So I'm sure you can only imagine the impact it had on Eisner as he was – plus Eisner was a Jewish man as he's creating this character and putting the character to page. So and I think Captain America came out – was it December of 1940? I think it was the same year.
I will try to look that up, but they definitely were close in arrival. I do remember reading that in the past. I'll say that the first thing that popped up to me was in the copy that we were provided to by Murd is the amazing ad for Schwinn bicycles.
I knew you were going to talk about that.
Hey, fellows, here's your bike.
Man, they do not make advertisements like they used to, because that's ooh, man, that was good times. Captain America's first appearance was in March of 1941.
Oh, okay. I was off by a few months then. All right.
Yep.
Shame on me. Okay. But again, obviously both were before Pearl Harbor, but the war certainly had grabbed the attention of the United States and of the American people in terms of what was being shown in the media, and this is an example of that.
Yeah, especially with the very, very obvious Hitler analog and Nazi analogs in this story. I mean, the purple people. I kept wanting to add Eater at the end of it, but and the mustache on this Hitler or Schmittler or whatever you want to call him is, oh God, it's one of the worst mustaches I've ever seen in my life and one of the worst hairdos I've ever seen in my life. But clearly, you know what they're trying to do.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting to point out that, I mean, that style of mustache it wasn't just Hitler who had that mustache. I mean, there are many people who had that style of mustache back then.
Yep.
In fact, I have a silly anecdote. When I worked in a now lost and ancient concept called the video store back in the 1990s, I remember there was a customer who had the unfortunate last name of Coffin.
Oh no.
Nice fellow, but he had an Adolf Hitler mustache.
Oof. And
I always wanted to ask him, like, what's going on there? Like, but he was a very pleasant fellow, a good customer, so I just didn't say anything about it. But it always struck me as very strange, and the name didn't help either. But But yeah, I mean, there's a panel in this story. I forgot which page it's on, where they have a real close up of the head of the purple stormtroopers. It's clearly Hitler, and the mustache and then the hair over the brow and all that. So, the enemies were already clearly delineated in our popular culture at that time, even though we weren't actively a belligerent in the war beyond our obvious help we were giving to Britain. So, Ian, I wanted to ask you: this is your first Golden Age comic you've read?
No, I've read a few others. I've read at the first the Action Comics at least once before, and I think I may have read the first appearance of Batman at least once in my life. Very, very different Batman and all.
So let me ask you then, since you've only read a handful.
Sure.
Did you find the whole tone and style jarring?
Not necessarily. And I think Will Eisner is very much to thank for that.
Absolutely.
because one of the things about Will Eisner that I've learned just from the bits of the Spirit that I've read over the years and other books that he's worked on is that his style is very timeless, both in art and in writing, and even with some of the awkward colloquialisms in the book and all, it just comes off as entertaining, and that's really what I wanted to see. And it's you could easily have told me this was a Silver Age comic, and I would have believed you. Not
only that, I agree. And if you read if you read Eisner's Spirit, they are, for me, they're essentially timeless. That's a good word you chose there, Ian. Yeah. And I think narratively they stand heads and tails above most stuff you're going to read from the Golden Age. Like a lot of times people say how when they try to read Golden Age books now, many readers, they tend to find them very difficult to get through. I think when you read the Spirit, that's not an issue.
Oh yeah, yeah.
As I look at these first few pages, first of all, he uses words like implacable, which you're not going to see vocabulary like that in most Golden Age comics. And just again, Eisner's ability to tell a story is so on display here. It was a pleasure to read this. And although, again, just looking back at page one of the things I really got a kick out of, and I purposely saved the Schwinn ad for you, Ian, because I knew you would really get a charge out of that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I'm reading here. Please, when the North and South finally settled their differences and the states were again united. Like just a little disagreement over the dinner table, and it was all worked out.
And nothing was ever a issue again. We've all been completely peaceful. Everything's fine.
It's interesting because when you look at how history is portrayed in various time periods,
yeah,
you always get a fascinating insight into, at least on the sort of popular consumption level, how something's being presented. Like, looking at the World War I in the trenches in 1917, fighting to preserve the principles of democracy, which World War I was basically had nothing to do with, essentially.
Yeah.
But again, that was even today, some people might think that was like, well, that's the point of World War I. It's kind of the popular romanticized notion of that horrific conflict.
Mm-hmm.
The Civil War, of course, it was a lot more complicated than, there were just differences that we all worked out. So it's very interesting to see how the events are viewed in a different time period.
Well, I think probably the one part of this that does not age well to me is the pre-child labor laws inclusion of a little boy on the front lines like that. Dealing with this like on Uncle Sam's shoulders.
Oh, his so-called his sidekick, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. That I don't think you'd see much of today. I mean, sure, there's Damian Wayne, but this ain't no Damian Wayne. Like this is just a little kid who's right there in the thick of it.
we have to remember though, Ian, that using the often very young sidekick was a staple of these books because they wanted kids to feel like they could project themselves into the story, that they were part of the action.
Oh,
so
sure. Yeah,
very common to see that concept used.
Absolutely.
Throughout.
Indubitably.
I also wanted to point out props to Eisner for bringing in a sense, current issues, and that he talks about the Dust Bowl. He makes references to the Depression. Because, the Great Depression was still going on in 1940. It hadn't really ended. I mean, our getting involved in the war, that's going to allow our economy to sort of overcome the Depression, because we're going to ramp up this massive approach to total war and war production. But I really appreciated how he's not shying away from the impact of that, and also how that kind of economic despair can drive people towards extremism, as you put it, Ian, as the purple people eaters were, trying to propagate here. So, and again, that's a parallel to what's going on in Europe, and even in smaller ways in the United States, where you had people who were drawn to both the extremes of both right and the left. I mean, there was a significant communist movement, for example, in Europe and in the United States, and a lot of that was driven by the frustration, the despair many people felt about their experiences with the Depression. So this is. I mean, Amir, would you say this is pretty sophisticated for the Golden Age?
Well, without a doubt. Yeah.
So this is a great selection, Amir.
And the other thing that was very striking to me, going back to the art for a minute, is just how well rendered the facial expressions are.
Oh yeah, he's a tremendous artist.
Oh yeah. Because compared to the other Golden Age comics that I have read, that's often one of the things that's lacking is the art.
Go ahead, Ian. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Well, just more in like how sometimes it can appear to be very two-dimensional and stiff, and you don't really get the character expressions that you would get in today's comics, whether it be just the fact that inking and coloring has advanced to the way that it is today, or just that they only had so much to work with. With here, you get an idea of what each character is saying and feeling so well rendered, even when the panels are so small.
For example, look at page 2, middle of the page, where you see the charlatan who's going to start this, this essentially this fascist movement, and the panel where he's saying, "Hey, I could name you 3 dictators who started with a falling smaller than that." Look at his expression in his face. Look at the bags under his eyes and sort of the leer as he's speaking.
Yep.
You're right. I mean, most Golden Age art, you don't see. Granted, they're trying to produce these books very quickly, but you don't see that level of detail often.
Absolutely, yeah. And even the colors. Even the colors. I'm very, very impressed with everything on display here, which is to be expected from a legend like Will Eisner. But it's. I came away very satisfied with what I experienced reading this comic for the first time.
Murd, how many times have you read this story often, or was this your first time?
This is my first time reading the original text.
Okay.
I had previously read DC's Secret Origins number 19, which came out in 1987, and it featured the secret origin of Uncle Sam and also Kirby's The Guardian. And the retelling in Secret Origins number 19 was written by Len Wein, who was the one who reintroduced Uncle Sam to the DC universe in the early 70s in that Justice League story as part of the Freedom Fighters. And the art was by Murphy Anderson, who's a legend in his own right, and a strong admirer of Golden Age artist Lou Fine, who produced the cover for National Comics number 1 and several others to come follow. He was a member of the quality bullpen in the Golden Age. The story in Secret Origins number 19 is kind of a conflation of the story we read here, National Comics number 1, and Uncle Sam's first origin is written by Eisner in National Comics number 5, which goes into a little more detail as to about how Uncle Sam came to be, and also fleshes out his connection to the American Revolution, thus justifying his inclusion in this introducing episode. Because the first page of this story, we do see some mention made of 1776 and how a spirit was born on the field of battle. Let's see. Yeah. The precise wording. In 1776, as a new but tattered flag was hoisted over the 13 free states, a new spirit was born. a spirit that grew until 48 states became united under one flag. Out of this spirit, like a guiding father, came Uncle Sam, as Americans fondly named him, to watch over the destinies of growing America. And in issue number 5 of National Comics, we see an American patriot named Samuel, who gives his life in order to distract Hessian troops so that critical supplies can be taken through to General Washington and Valley Forge. And he is visited by Uncle Sam, already dressed up in his star-spangled top hat and blue tailcoat and everything, a visual depiction of Uncle Sam that would not evolve until a couple centuries later. But in the Quality universe, he shows up there in 1776, helps the spirit of the dying Samuel up, and the two of them basically merge on the spot and become the heroic avatar of Uncle Sam.
Go ahead, Bert. I'm sorry.
It's somewhat similar to the Spectre, actually, and that the Spectre also is kind of a superhuman, supernatural, symbolic force that has to merge with a human spirit in order to incarnate and act in the mortal plane. And this is something that Spectre writer John Ostrander explored at some detail in a very long storyline called The Haunting of America in the mid-'90s, which is, as a kind of a side note, I strongly recommend. Huh. But this is the first time that I've actually read the first appearance of Uncle Sam or his Golden Age origin. I'd only ever read this story in Secret Origins in the 80s that kind of conflated those two Golden Age stories.
And my follow-up question is then, based on what you're just saying, are we to assume then that Uncle Sam merges with the recently murdered Ezra Smith? Because that's what I kind of extrapolated that from this. I don't know if I was supposed to, but because they make Ezra Smith look like Uncle Sam.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, and it would explain why he takes such a shine to young Buddy right away.
Right.
But National Comics number 5 shows us a different story, a different guy who's actually named Sam, who's a resident of a Midwestern town that is being menaced by yet another group of homegrown American fascists known as the Black Legion. So that's if these two stories, National Comics number 1 and National Comics number 5, are part of the same continuity, then I think we have to set aside the possibility that Ezra Smith is Uncle Sam.
Well, it's also certainly possible that maybe they had that idea in issue 1, forgot about it, and then made issue 5, because if there's one thing we know from the Silver Age and Stan Lee is that there's plenty of things that have been forgotten about and then changed as time moves on when it comes to comics.
Yeah,
absolutely. I notice also the Golden Age is not shy away from people dying.
Oh yeah.
Ezra gets murdered on that second page or third page, I should say.
Yeah. So. Most haunting to me is the image of the purple shirt with the Hitler mustache that you guys were talking about, cold-bloodedly murdering his own Confederate. Yep.
Yeah.
Comes running in trying to warn the guy about what just happened to him out in the desert, his encounter with Uncle Sam. And this guy, Scar, this is on page 5. Right in the middle of it, he says, "We don't want a weakling in the purple shirts." Just a look of reptilian non-humanity in his very Hitler-like face at that moment. That's the image among all images in this story that's going to stick with me, I think.
Yeah. The image on a positive note that will stick with me is on the very next page, on page 6, with Uncle Sam lifting the car above his head, looking for his hat, because.
Shades of Action Comics number 1 right there.
Yes, it is. Where's my hat? Here it is, Uncle.
Murd, now, Uncle Sam's powers, he's essentially invulnerable, correct?
Pretty much, yes. He's as strong and as unharmable as the American people make him. He's a manifestation of the spirit of the American people. And as powerful as they believe they are and as strongly as they believe in their core ideals, that is how strong and as invincible as he is. And his power set did expand over the years, too. Especially once we get into the Bronze and Copper Ages, where suddenly he gets the ability to open red, white, and blue vortexes between Earth 2 and Earth X. But here he's just basically really strong and nothing can harm him.
At least he didn't have red, white, and blue laser eye beams, because that would have just been going way too far.
Yeah.
I found it. I'm sorry, Murd. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Chris.
I found it interesting when they show the president who's kidnapped and so forth. They don't make him Roosevelt, right? Because he's not in a wheelchair. Although many Americans didn't actually realize that Roosevelt actually was in a wheelchair.
Right.
So that should be noted as well. But
yep.
Actually, I think they went out of their way not to show his face clearly at all.
Yeah.
And speaking of Roosevelt, he will come in as an aside on our discussion on our next hero. They definitely did their best not to show the president in this, even as he was being kidnapped, with a very television news like president kidnapped headline. That's straight that's straight out of television for me, which was fascinating for long before television.
Let's point out also the drama of Eisner's page layouts. I mean, his ability to tell a story was already clearly on display here. I'm looking actually on the last page of this. This is a Golden Age book, so there's multiple stories. So each story is short, but on page 9, where he's holding the two fascists basically by the seat of their pants, and their limbs are kind of flailing into the adjacent panels, and then Uncle Sam's almost punching through the panel, and he's coming through the wall there. So there's that real drama, his ability to tell a story visually that Kirby and a few others were on the same level. But this is like, in terms of Golden Age art, I mean, I'm not as well versed in the Golden Age as other people, but I've read enough to look at this. This is top flight stuff. I mean, this is really impressive.
One of my favorite superhero and comic book tropes in general is breaking the borders, because it adds to the kinetic nature of the art, and it tells you that literally anything can happen in this comic, because it's not even just confined to the borders of the panels. And that's on display here in spades, and I love it.
Yep. Although I again, it's my jaded view of human beings, especially because having read history so much throughout my life. But I found it hard to believe that suddenly most of the purple shirts would turn and join Uncle Sam against their masters. But it was uplifting.
It's just that overwhelming charm of the American spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Eisner has a lot of action and plot developments to get to here. He doesn't have time to entire inspiring, rousing speech into his 9-panel page. He just has Uncle Sam utter one sentence, and, well, by golly, that's enough.
Can't you Americans see that if you put your liberty or government in the hands of men like these, you'll be betrayed?
And it's literally a talking head. That's my favorite part.
Yep. I've never known people who are prone to mob mentality listen to reason, but hey, we can always dream.
Yeah, you never know.
So,
one moment of glorious Golden Age naivete that I particularly enjoyed was the very last panel of page 7, when Uncle Sam has just created a diversion so that young Buddy can get away from the purple shirts, and he pretends to be captured so they can take him into their fortress. Meanwhile, Buddy runs to an army headquarters. It doesn't say which fort or anything. It's just army headquarters.
Yep.
And he runs inside. He's this little 9-year-old kid or whatever, and he runs in and says, Uncle Sam is in trouble at a secret fort. They don't laugh. They don't tell him, pat him on the head and tell him to go play with his jacks. They order out Company K at once.
And my favorite Golden Age trope is actually the very last panel of the entire story on page 9 with, well, readers, addressing the readers directly. It appears I have an assistant who will share my adventures, and I'll bet right now they will be mighty exciting ones.
Of course.
Yep. Got to sell it to the readers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, very
so,
much.
So, what'd you think of this overall, having read the actual first appearance for the first time?
Well, I think that Eisner crammed an amazing amount of storytelling into these 9 pages here. Lots of crazily paced action and plot development and political commentary, all kinds of stuff. And plus, a little bit of kiddie appeal along the way with Buddy Smith. It's definitely a Golden Age story. It's definitely Eisner in the early phase of his career and development. He will, of course, get even more sophisticated as time goes on.
Oh, God, yeah.
I'm not even sure if the spirit had appeared yet in newspapers or comic books. I am uncertain, but this is it can't be more than a couple of months either way of the first appearance of the spirit. So this is definitely near the beginning of Eisner's career, but he's already showing talent head and shoulders above many of his contemporaries. And it's just it's glorious corn-fed Americana with some serious contemporary political overtones. And I just found it extremely enjoyable. I've always enjoyed the Uncle Sam character. I like his folksy nature. Yeah, Eisner's not giving him as strong an accent as he would later obtain, which I've heard described various ways. Maybe it's a New English accent. That's what Roy Thomas thinks. Maybe it's a New York accent, which is what our friend Eric Nolan Wethington of Tomorrow's thinks it should be, since James Montgomery Flagg, the artist who created what we think of as like the modern conception visually of Uncle Sam.
The recruiting poster, yep.
Right. Right around the circa World War I.
Yeah,
he was from New York. He was from Westchester County. So Eric thinks he ought to have Uncle Sam probably has a New York accent. Others perceive it as Midwestern. Every way you would hear it, it's an American accent. That's the important thing. Some people even think he talks like a Southerner, but I guess everybody hears it in his or her own way. But Eisner just he doesn't ascribe a particular regional dialect to Uncle Sam. He just he speaks in just homespun colloquialisms, and he's jolly and avuncular, and he takes Uncle's little buddy up on his shoulders, no child labor laws or not, and makes him part of his adventures. This is jolly good, patriotic, just prior to World War II fun. With a serious message about the possibility of buntism and fascism developing on American soil, and just in a lot of different ways, it's a great snapshot of the times and the tastes of the times. And I'm happy to have finally read the original story of one of my favorite archetypal superheroes.
And Murr, just to answer your question, I'm looking here online. The Spirit first appeared in Register and Tribune Syndicate, June 1940.
Okay.
So right around this time.
Yep.
That's very close. Yeah.
And speaking of accents, Murd, I loved your, let's call it your FDR-esque reading of the introduction to this episode, by the way.
To me, it is very hard for me to not hear Uncle Sam almost as Foghorn Leghorn. With a I say, because there's something about the outfit that's always struck incredibly Southern to me, and I don't know what it is, but if it's intended to be New York, then I went the complete opposite. It might just be that I'm more familiar with him from Freedom Fighters era and what have you, and just I don't know, first thing that came to my head.
I've always kind of heard, like a Vermonter Green Mountain Boy kind of accent.
I could see that. I could see that. Yep. All right, and from there,
yes,
from one stalwart legend of comics to another, over to Captain America number 194 for the first mention of the character. And then we have the first story of the character in Captain America Sentinel of Liberty number 6 after the fact. Well, many, many, many years later, which, again, is one of my favorite things about comics, is that if it's mentioned once, it's in canon, baby, and you can bring it back whenever you want.
I dug that. By the way, Ian, I think it's Sentinel of Liberty's 7 and 8.
I believe it starts in 6.
Oh, right. Does it?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies.
Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's the last story.
I'm misreading what I'm looking at here on Comixology. I apologize. It's 6 and 7. Yep.
No worries. Yep. So I guess we should start off with the Captain America number 194 by the amazing Jack Kirby. As although the story itself really doesn't include the character that we're mentioning much,
Mad Bomb.
It allowed Chris to do that.
Perfect reading, Chris.
Exactly.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You just have to explode out of whatever else is being said. Mad Bomb.
Well, I mean, when you think about, when I get excited about some kind of high-tech casing with a floating brain in it that can drive millions of people insane. No, let's give a little bit of background here, because this is when Kirby returns to Marvel in the mid to late 1970s, and this is probably talked about when we did our Captain America spotlights several years ago. But and Marvel, as they should have, I mean, in my opinion, let Kirby do what he wanted. And he basically edited his own titles, and one of the books he did was Captain America. And when you read these stories, what's interesting is that Kirby, and again, I can't blame him. He was the king, but he basically disregarded all Marvel continuity when he returned to Captain America, because 1970s Captain America there was a lot of complex, compelling stories going on, like Steve Englehart did, like the Secret Empire, and the Nomad and Nixon, and a lot of great, the Falcon, a lot of great stuff was going on. And then Kirby came in, and he still kept the Falcon in the book. Because remember, it's Captain America the Falcon for quite some time in the Bronze Age. But he just told his own stories, which, of course, as the co-creator of Captain America, he damn well had the right to do that. But when you read those stories, it can be a little jarring if you don't know the overall context of that time.
Yeah,
and there's kind of minimal references to. Like, for example, they mention S.H.I.E.L.D. in this story, but there's minimal references throughout Kirby's run to sort of like the larger Marvel universe. And some people love these stories. Some people just don't find that to be their cup of tea. As Ian stated, we just get a quick introduction to the American Revolution version of Steve Rogers, or Steven Rogers, I should say, / Captain America. So Ian, is this the first time you've read Kirby Captain America 70s?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I can't. Well, just tell me what you think.
All right. If I divorce if I divorce myself from the fact that it's in the 70s,
yeah,
which I have to do, then it's excellent. I just know that there's like you said, so many other Captain America stories in the 70s that are so different than this, that I almost divorced it in my head from the Captain America series itself. Like I have to say to myself, this is Jack Kirby's Captain America. Part of me almost wishes they'd just given him a damn miniseries. That way, we could continue to have what we were having with all of the, character advances in Captain America that I know exist in the 70s. However, this is a very enjoyable story, and I will give it that. It's some beautiful Kirby art as well. I mean, like the colors pop. The battle is almost like apocalyptic at times, and it's just, I don't know, it works beautifully as a Jack Kirby story. I just need to divorce it from 1970s Captain America in my head.
Now, let me ask this question, because people are on different sides for this.
Yeah.
How do you, as a reader, how does Kirby's dialogue affect you?
So at times it's fine. Then Falcon speaks. and I have some issues with that. But overall I think it's pretty good. I just a little bit too much jive in there for me. And I get it. It's it's Kirby, and it's also of the times a little bit. It's just not as advanced as I would like in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, some people, as you read different histories and analyses and fans and so forth, some people don't feel that Kirby's dialogue was very flat.
Yeah.
Others find it kind of fun, refreshing, and charming. People are fall on different sides of that. But yeah. I just want to get your take, because I figured you probably had never read any of these stories before.
Yeah. Jive. So, I'm still trying, friend. I'll stake my life on that.
What's interesting about that is, because the Falcon was a well-developed character by this point.
Right.
The Falcon doesn't talk like that.
I know.
Prior to these stories, not in that very stereotypical way.
Yeah.
But I also found, converse, very interesting, and major props to Kirby, is at one point he and Steve are having a discussion about like their family past, mm-hmm. and Falcon talks about how, well, my ancestors were probably like slaves for, your ancestors, something like, he said something like that. I have it in front of me, but
yeah,
like Kirby goes after the toxic, at the toxic heart of things of slavery.
Yeah.
Which wasn't getting the play in mainstream American comics that you might expect in a story today. So I was really taken and impressed with that, but not surprising though, because Kirby was an extremely well-read man who knew his history and was just plugged into so many things, and was a deeply informed man and a man of tremendous critical thinking powers. So that was a thrill to read that in the story.
Yeah, and I did appreciate that. I just personally wish that the dialogue from Falcon was a little bit more polished. But the overall idea of what's being discussed is actually right on point. And really, like, I didn't have any problems with the story itself. Like, I think the story works well for what it's trying to accomplish. My only problems with the visuals, and I mean, it's barely even a nick, is that these giants don't really look very giant to me. I think that at times the perspective is forced where it kind of just looks like they're maybe like 7 feet. And to me, that's not a giant unless you're Andre the Giant. But then again, there's other panels where that's less the case, and you can see just how how much they dwarf over other individuals. So yeah, it's a little bit inconsistent at times.
What I also liked thinking of the giants was that, and you see this throughout Kirby's work. You might notice he was talking about glands and the experimentation. He would always bring in to his science fiction, like he'd always bring science fiction, like elements of things he was reading about, to give it again sort of that veneer of like this could be real, or elements that you're hearing about in the technology or science of that time. That he takes them, he tweaks them, brings them a little bit more into the realm of the fantastic, and brings them into the story, which is always such a treat when you're looking at his work. Because you always see those signs, like even the Mad Bomb itself. Like if you look at like the Mad Bomb, in that 2-page spread, like again, no one does like far out technology and machinery better than Kirby, because you think, okay, I can kind of see where like this could be real. Like you can see all like the way he's drawn it, and like you can almost imagine like, okay, maybe this could actually be something.
Yep.
And in a lot of his work, you see things like where decades later, like you can almost see like in a way it was made into reality. Fascinating.
Oh, so, definitely.
Mert, how'd you feel about this story?
Well, honestly, Chris, this is the first of Kirby's 70s cap that I've read.
Terrific.
It's the one and only issue of it that I own, by incredible coincidence and by still further remarkable serendipity. As I was digging through a few of my long boxes at home to dig out the single issues of our next Book of the Month episode, I happened to come across this very comic in that same long box. I was afraid I was going to have to read it digitally somehow, but instead I just... Fantastic, good luck. But yeah, as far as the story goes, yes, the Mad Bomb. Yes, I'm looking at pages 2 and 3, and yes, there is that giant explosive capsule with a human brain floating in it. The Big Daddy. That is that conceptual Kirby craziness to which you referred, Chris. And yes, I'm. And as far as the dialogue goes, well, I know how Kirby's scripts run. It's a little idiosyncratic. It's a little bit off the wall. He likes to put scare quotes around some unusual words. But yeah, it's kind of part of the fun ride, I think, part of the trippiness. And I'll agree with Ian that it's not the best Falcon dialogue that has ever been written. But it is kind of in step with the way that black men were typically characterized at the time, more's the pity.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we got to the Trojan Horde itself, all the mutants and those who were victims of the treatment that the royalist forces of America were subjecting them to. Yeah, that kind of weirded me out because, it's kind of an Achilles heel of mine as a consumer of popular culture that I just cannot deal with stories about people who are turned into stuff against their will. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So I tended to focus a little more just on the 4 pages of this story that actually had to do with the Revolutionary War era Captain America.
Right.
And we should point out, as Ian mentioned, it's very brief, but the next books we're going to talk about, The Sense of Liberty, Roger Stern makes a whole 2-part epic out of it.
Yeah.
Decades later. Which is, tremendous.
Of all people to do it, it's going to be Roger Stern, because I mean, a man who appreciates history as much as he does. I think it makes perfect sense overall for a guy of his caliber to retouch something of Kirby. It was made for it, essentially.
And I was thinking about Roger Stern's work recently for other reasons. I don't remember why he popped in my head, but I was reflecting. Oh, because we were talking about when we did our Spider-Man micro spotlight, we were talking about that Silver Age era, and I was thinking about how much I'd love to talk one day about the Roger Stern era of Spider-Man from the '80s, which is just top flight Spidey. But I was thinking about so many great books Roger Stern has written. And he's really one of the great writers of the medium as you get into the night he owns the 1980s. I mean, when you think about all the great books he did in the 1980s, and his run with John Byrne and Captain America, while short, is a classic. In fact, we should probably talk about that at some point down the road, Baron Blood and so forth. But what a thrill to see, because I didn't realize he wrote these two stories, but what a thrill to see his name on the credits. When we get to the Sentinel of Liberty aspect of this story,
yeah, so. I'll make one more comment on the dialogue.
Please.
The balloon that probably fell the flattest for me was ha 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 ha. You're as funny as a sawed off crutch. like what? So I guess he's not that funny.
Again, there are. It's one of the great timeless debates in comics. There are people who think that, Kirby was best served when Stan Lee was writing his dialogue, and other people who think that, let Kirby do what Kirby wants to do.
Sure.
So,
yep.
I leave it to you to decide where you fall on that. But
yep.
I personally, I think you can appreciate both. They're very different.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. But go ahead.
No, and I mean the 4 pages that are important to the story. They do tell a tale. And that's really,
sure do.
That's why Roger Stern had enough to work on to later go back and flesh this out a little bit. So that's
you're talking about Kirby's one of the greatest plotters in the history of comics.
Absolutely, yep.
So the story, regardless of how you may feel about the dialogue, the story is always rock solid.
No question.
And you're right. Like Stern could take those few pages and he blew it up into a whole yarn.
Yep.
So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The king. Let's transition then to the Sentinel of Liberty story.
Definitely.
One more note before
please.
Bicentennial year of 1976 behind us. There was one further very brief appearance of Captain Stephen Rogers of the Continental Army. It was in Captain America's Bicentennial Battles.
I had a feeling. Well done. Please elaborate. Excellent.
Just thought we had to throw that out there before we left the 70s behind. But Colonial Cap did appear as a pinup in full costume in that story. Yeah. It was just kind of a what if. If he had been created in 1776, this is how the good captain might have attired himself. And that is where, in that Kirby pinup, which had the Red Skull skulking around in the background as a Hessian Nazi. That is the visual design. So just as Kirby gave Stern just enough story material to work with in those 4 pages of Cap number 194, Kirby gave artists Ron Frenz and Roger Langridge enough to work with as far as the costume design of Colonial Cap in that one little pinup in Cap's Bicentennial Battles.
Myrna, I'm so glad you brought that up because I'm familiar with the existence of the Bicentennial Battles special that Kirby did, but I've never looked it through the whole thing, so I'm not surprised that character is in there. So fantastic! I'm glad you noted that.
Now,
excellent.
It's just that one pinup, and he's not actually a participant in the story. It involves Captain America with his guide, Mr. Buddha, Buda, who's
fantastic.
Contemplator. He's an elder of the universe, but he's kind of Cap's psychopomp, his spirit guide through a journey through time and space to discover, the heretofore unknown truths about the American spirit.
And doesn't he take him through aspects of American history in the story, if I remember correctly?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Now, one of the things that I appreciate about this Roger Stern story, and you can even apply it to the Jack Kirby pinup if you want to. All of this is down in diary, and throughout the course of the story, we learned that there was a painting of this, ancestor of Steve's that was, lost to time and he's not sure where it is. So this isn't even necessarily what he potentially looked like. This is to me Steve's, memory version of what all this is, because he's sitting there reading the diary.
That's true.
So
and he's Yankee doodling away at a sketch pad, producing his own conception of what he thought his ancestor's costume would have looked like.
Exactly.
And the sketch happens to look very much like that pinup I just mentioned that Kirby did.
Yep. Yeah. No, and that's what's great to me is that this version of the character, obviously, Steve's going off of his own costume. So, there's either you could do the before or after here. You could do this version of the character existed, and that's why Captain America's costume looks the way it did, or Cap knows what his own costume looks like and imagined a what if of what his ancestor's costume looked like.
Doesn't Levinstein give you a chill sometimes? That was God, Ian. You just earn your keep in spades, brother. Holy mackerel.
I try my best, sir. I try my best.
Well done. Well done. And we should point out again, Ron Frenz, another great mainstay Marvel artist of the 1980s as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Always a thrill to see his work.
Always a thrill to see his tiny heads and big bodies. I love the art for what it is, but there's that first image we see of the blacksmith Steven Rogers, and that's a bit off proportionate. But what are you gonna do?
I'm just always excited to see the American Revolution get some play in comic books.
Oh, sure.
I'm thinking back to that. I think it was an annual John Byrne did where Clark Kent is existing in the time of the Revolution, and his father Jor-El is like the corrupt king of Britain, like he's an alien who's like now taken over the Britain and the colonies. You guys read this story?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah,
not ringing a Liberty Bell with me at all.
Yeah, I can't remember the title. I'm pretty sure it's an annual. It's really good. It's an Elseworlds type story, but I love the American Revolution gets some play here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah,
because the American Revolution. I mean, we could talk about Tomahawk, of course, but doesn't have an enormous footprint in the American comic book medium. So
I also can't help but get Hamilton Burr vibes off of the duel that starts off this this story on August 16th, 1781. As we record this, we're 2 days away from Hamilton coming to Disney Plus. For anybody who hasn't gotten to see the musical in person, gets to see a performance of the original cast performance all up there on Disney Plus.
Well, Ian, I'm glad you brought that up because I mean, me of all people, I've never seen Hamilton.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I was figured eventually it's going to show up on some platform, so
Yep.
I'm really excited to see this. I'm a big student of that period, especially, and also of Hamilton himself. I mean, granted, I realize the musical probably polishes some of the rough edges, but I'm Jones for that. But
definitely.
I thought about it too when they showed the duel.
Yep. Now, the other thing, talking about layout, on page 34, further into the story, totally a Kirby layout on that bottom panel of introducing the parody of Captain Yankee Doodle in the way it is, with the arm outstretched like that and the charging captain. That I cannot help but think Kirby on that for what Friends is trying to pull off.
Friends' art is clearly influenced by Kirby. I mean, that which is so many artists are. I mean,
Yep.
in the comic book medium, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Tori's facial expression in that panel with the big wide open teeth, and also in the panel above it when he's reaming out his servants. They're both definite Kirby influences there.
Absolutely. Yep.
In general, I found this story really fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a good romp. It's the kind of Scent of Liberty. In case some listeners aren't familiar, was it like basically a Captain America anthology title?
Yes.
Which addressed Captain America in different time periods, or in this case, even a different incarnation. And the leading stories were done by the great Mark Waid and Ron Garney. And Mark Waid and Ron Garney had what I consider a classic run on Captain America, which was tragically cut short by the whole Heroes Reborn fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't read that run, that's the run where Sharon Carter returns. It's a classic period in Captain America's publishing history, in my opinion. And they also did some work on the Sentinel of Liberty comic as well. So, like for example, issue 6, the first story is a return to the Silver Age. It's done by Waid and Garney. But this is a really fun title in general. I'm really glad you guys selected this.
Definitely. If I remember correctly, I think it was the first issue of Sentinel of Liberty that was set in the future of Captain America. Which I remember liking a lot when I first picked that up off the stands, and again that's Waid and Garney at their finest right there.
I'll have to reread that one. I don't remember that. In fact, in the issue 7, if you go past this story, there's a Brian K. Vaughan story in here.
I was going to bring that up, and
which was very poignant.
Yeah.
and it gets Vaughan. It was so well done,
especially since you mentioned FDR. That's why I was going to bring that up, because it's all about the not the lifetime of FDR, but all the times Cap met FDR throughout his lifetime. And the last time he met him, and then FDR's eventual demise, and what happens immediately afterwards.
And they note that in the story that Steve is shocked when FDR appears to him in a wheelchair.
Yep.
Again, we have to remember that obviously media was so different in the 1930s and 40s compared to today, where it was actually possible to some degree conceal his physical state from much of the public, which would be impossible today. But that Vaughan story is also excellent. So.
Absolutely. Yep. So, what do we think of how this story winds up after the full issue that follows concludes everything?
In terms of how they draw the link between the Stephen Rogers of the colonial period, and then I thought it was delightful. It's classic Captain America in terms of his sense of mission at the end, and how the weight of responsibility and the sense of legacy, and they bring the Red Skull into it there at the end, and how they title and that how he's going to be that symbol, and the last page where he's standing with the classic Golden Age shield, and looking down on him as his ancestor from the 18th century. So I just thought it was a really well told, just solid sort of legacy story.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger. Well, it's fairly. This story, and not just the way it ended, but the whole thing is somewhat indicative of the way Roger Stern, what kind of headspace he was occupying as a writer at this point in the late '90s. He had recently been writing for that tragically short-lived, also an anthology series, Marvel Universe.
Oh yes, that was a lot of fun.
It really was. I wish that had gone on much longer, and I'm happy to say that Kurt Busiek is working on an upcoming Marvels type project that's going to take kind of the same idea.
Yes, that's right.
Take characters and concepts from any period in Marvel history, past, present, or future, and throw them into a comic and just have it work. So that's what Stern was doing. So he was kind of because of that. He was telling stories sampled from different periods in history. Maybe something from ancient past in one issue, something from the 1950s with the Monster Hunters the next. He was kind of thinking holistically about Marvel's past. And in this story, he's able to throw in like a cameo by Ulysses Bloodstone,
which was great.
Yep. Yeah. He was also a member of the aforementioned 50s Monster Hunter team. So the way he chooses to bring things full circle, to show how different eras of history, whether real or fictional, can influence one another in this way. And fiction, history and art, all the same. He just shows how Steve Rogers, 20th century Steve Rogers, sitting there contemplating his ancestor's life and doodling and imagining what his ancestors what would have looked like, and just as musing about it with his commanding officer, General Phillips, how that in a way inspires General Phillips' decision to come up with a costume for Steve to wear as a costumed agent and symbol of the American forces to counteract the Red Skull. So it's just showing the way that the past and the present can kind of feed into one another. I think that's an idea that Stern was toying with there, and it just resulted in a beautiful little ending to this story. Like Chris said, it was all about legacy.
I also liked, going back to the Bloodstone character, how earlier on when Stephen Rogers meets him in the tavern, and Stern uses Bloodstone to talk about, sort of the sordid realities of power politics and how, I've seen revolutions before and republics. He talks about Rome, for example, and how, in the end, there's always an elite who really run things. And you read enough history to think about it. Essentially, at least in my peanut gallery view, that's virtually always true. And, Steve, of course, stands as sort of in opposition to that. And then at the end, Bloodstone actually decides, because you can tell he's kind of inspired by Stephen's example, that he actually helps the Continental Army there. So there's that moment of hope, even though I think really Bloodstone's right. But it's again, if you're going to have the character Stephen Rogers, it's all about hope.
Yes, and
that you always have to return to that.
Absolutely. So yet again, going to the American dream, and I also have to touch on. I appreciate that bringing in Ulysses Bloodstone, bringing in a character that first appeared in the 70s like this. To be in this when the concept of the Revolutionary War Captain America was introduced in the 70s as well, I think is a little bit fitting.
Ian, once again, nice touch.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. And plus, I don't get enough Ulysses Bloodstone. I've always kind of liked the character. I've only seen him a few times over the years, but I just enjoy an immortal character. Yeah.
Yeah, and this story in particular gives you an idea of how being on Earth for 10,000 years can make one a little bit jaded.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He's been around. He's seen a few things. He's seen empires rise and fall. But even he is not beyond the ability of a Rogers to inspire.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, but no. Overall, this was a nice, fun, jaunty experience, and a little extra piece of Captain America history to throw in there for everybody.
Jaunty, good word to apply there, Ian.
I do my best.
All right. Just whistling Yankee Doodle all the way home.
All right, let's go ahead.
Our final entry in this episode is going to be a little less jaunty, I think we'll find. Yes,
definitely. Yes. Yep.
All right, the black coat.
Yeah. So I had never read anything Black Coat before. This is my first experience with the character, and I had no idea that Francisco Francavilla worked on.
Art is amazing.
Oh my God! Yeah. I mean, a guy who's
that
done.
Was how we at CBS first became aware of his work. Actually,
love it. Absolutely love it. It's beautifully painterly. With the black and white art that's portrayed here, almost Cassaday-esque in its layout, but almost even a little bit Alex Ross or Doug Braithwaite at times. I'm floored by how beautiful this artwork is. It's stunning.
And the Black Coat first came out in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I read this back in 2006, but I haven't read it since then. But I'd basically forgotten that Francavilla had worked on this, and I realized that this was my first exposure to his work back in 2006, and it's as breathtaking now as it was then.
Oh, absolutely.
And we think about all the work he's done since this book. What a great artist!
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'd say. I mean, unfortunately, I think I'm more of a fan of the art than I am of the story here. And, I mean, it was bound to happen eventually for me. This one was a little bit of a miss on story. I think the writing could have been a little bit crisper and a little bit sharper to get the point across of the character. It's kind of very difficult for me to read through, to be honest. Even though I loved looking at the images.
So, Ian, elaborate. How did it miss the mark for you?
It just kind of felt flat. I don't know if it was just the overall like jumping into the story, and then the dialogue itself like kind of just came off as a little bit wooden to me at times. I mean, again, it's nothing against the story itself that he's trying to tell. It felt a little. I really hate saying the word amateurish, but that's kind of how it fell for me. For how beautiful the art is, I would have liked to have seen a story that supported it a little bit more.
What'd you think, Word?
Well, I actually think I can add my voice to Ian's in his critique of the dialogue. It was a little bit stiff for me, too. And, well, even more nettlesome for me is the fact that it didn't really provide the period flavor I might hope for. I mean, I kept thinking to myself, I don't think they would have used that expression in 1775.
Good point.
So it wasn't 100% period authentic in that respect. But yeah, the plot, though, was engaging enough. I mean, it's kind of a Jack the Ripper-style murder mystery set against the backdrop of pre-revolutionary tensions and espionage and intrigue, and this really cool, pulpy 18th century Batman character, the Black Coat, who goes up against pirates and monsters and deals with the possibility of a traitor and his little cabinet of adjutants all in the course of a single story. Yeah, so it's fun, and I definitely agree with what Ian said about the artwork. The artwork, nice as the story is, the art is the real star here. No question about it.
Yep.
Yes, I see what Ian was saying about the painterly quality of the art. For me, it evokes the influences that Ian mentioned, plus I'd throw in the 19th century wood engravings of Gustave Doré.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's just got a really great old-timey, spooky, old-fashioned adventure tale feel to it, and it is a little bit pulpy, but it's a little bit pre-pulpy too, as is appropriate considering the story was supposed to be set in the 18th century.
Right.
So yeah. So this is a joy to revisit. I mean, this dates back to the earliest days of CGS.
Yeah.
Right? Having been, as Chris said, it was first published in 2006. I think it came out through Speakeasy Comics at first, but then its creators, Ben Licious, Adam Kogan, I think, and of course Francesco Francavilla, they took it over to Ape Entertainment, and the rest is history. I believe the guys, without me, I wasn't really a part of the group at that point just yet. But at the Pittsburgh Comic-Con 2006, I actually hung out with them at that convention, but didn't go along with them to do interviews or whatever. They talked to the creators there, and then had them on for a special episode, number 192, to talk to them at length about the Black Coat. And then had them back on again a few years later when the sequel to this is the Black Coat, A Call to Arms we're talking about here, by the way. Issue one of a 4-issue miniseries. There was a sequel called The Black Coat or Give Me Death, which came out long about 2009. So we had the guys back on again to talk about it then. And it's kind of been absent from the CGS airwaves ever since. So I'm glad that we're reviving it for this special revolutionary-themed episode right now. But it was nice for me to get back into this really excellent piece of illustrated fiction that was a hot topic of conversation for a while there in the very early days of this podcast.
It was episode 6.
Go ahead.
It was
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. It was episode 673 in 2009, by the way. And not only did you guys discuss the Black Coat, but you also discussed Doctor Who and the new CGS anthology.
Yes, you can still find copies of that on eBay sometimes.
Yep, and a bunch of artwork from at least one of the CGS anthologies has been posted to the supergroup somewhat recently, if I remember correctly.
You're talking about Comics Now, right?
No, the CGS anthology. It's a whole separate bag.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I mixed them up. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just stories that CGS listeners collaborated on and threw together and kind of self-published to distribute at super shows and whatnot. Yeah, some of the stories actually involved the CGS geeks, and others went in completely independent directions.
Yep.
Yeah, forgive me. In case some listeners don't know, Comics Now was a magazine, a literal magazine that Brian Deemer helmed, that had contributions from members of the cast and other creators. It was like a comics news magazine. What was it, 3 issues, Murd?
That's all we were able to get out there. There was a fourth, but it never quite made it to press.
Yeah, but the 3 issues are fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's great articles in them and art, and they're really well done.
Yep.
So, thank you, Chris. We were all pretty proud of the few issues we were able to get onto stands.
Yeah,
I autographed several copies of the first issue, actually, which had my kind of a truncated version of my Crisis on Infinite Earths thesis in it as an article.
Nice.
What I wanted to point out before I give my own take is that I'm looking online here. So apparently in 2013, they were going to do a new Black Coat story, The Blackest Dye, D-Y-E. I don't know if that actually came out or not. And then they also announced they had an app where you could download all the Black Coat stories. So I don't know if there's any new Black Coat since then. I can't speak to that.
I think they were trying to kickstart it for a while there.
Yeah, it is listed on Amazon, the Black Coat, Blackest Dye. So it did come out.
Okay, good. Okay.
And I don't know if it's still in print, but there are used copies available on Amazon.
Okay. So I was really excited by this when it came out because, I mean, as many listeners know, I'm a history teacher. I'm a passionate, lifelong student of history, especially of American military history. So I'm neck deep in love for the American Revolution, and I'm constantly studying it. So I was really excited for this. Like you guys, the art thrilled me more than the story. But having said that, I thought the plot was really engaging.
Yeah.
The dialogue didn't grab me as much, and that's possible that as they brought the character forward, that may have actually shown improvement, so to speak.
Right.
Because I haven't read subsequent arcs, but the art and the plot alone, I think, are worth. This book is worth being checking this book out. As I look at the page, the art is just breathtaking. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Francesco Francavilla, but what I really enjoyed about this was kind of taking almost like this, like Batman shadow concept. Like he has like his retainers who help him out, and you know he's in the intrigue of you know it's right before the American Revolution. It's 1775. Lexington conquered, or in April of 1775. He's friends with Benjamin Franklin. They name drop John and Sam Adams. So I always love when they had that historical fiction. They give it that sort of that background. And so all those motifs really engaged me. So I wanted to go back because I probably read this when it came out, but it's 14 years ago, and so I don't remember it vividly in terms of the overall story. But this first issue definitely re-engaged me.
Right.
So if you're a fan of any of the themes we just mentioned, you know, shadow type stuff, Batman, pulpy aspects, you know, Ian mentioned sort of the Jack the Ripper vibe. You have that element to it as well. And then some historical backdrop, the intrigue. It's all there. So I think this is a very interesting story that they're trying to tell here. Go ahead, Ian.
No, I was going to say, did any of you watch Turn Washington Spies?
No, I've never watched it. How is it?
It's a very good show, all about the history of spies during the Revolution.
Washington used spies extensively in the American Revolution.
Indeed, yeah.
So, yeah.
That's kind of the feel this story gives me. Is something similar to that. That's something that I appreciated a lot. Is essentially the spy aspect of it and the detective work. Absolutely, the strongest part of the general plot for me was there for that. But anybody who hasn't watched Turn Washington Spies, I know it was on Netflix at one point, but if not, it's probably available somewhere online. I'd give it a watch because it's some good historical fiction. It's 4 seasons long, and I enjoyed it all the way through.
Another interesting thing to sort of add to the historical aspect of this is that the Black Coat and his retainers have a submersible. And they're actually, now it wasn't this sophisticated, but there was a submersible called the Turtle, which was actually invented by an American, and it was based like a bobbing barrel essentially. Obviously, it was a little more sophisticated than that, but that's how it kind of looks. And one man could sit inside it, and it was just below the surface. And they tried to use it to attach explosives to try to blow up some of the British ships that were blockading New York Harbor in the early years of the Revolution. It wasn't able to fulfill its mission in that it never sank any ships, but it it worked to some degree in that they were able to actually get out there in this. You can see models of it in different naval museums.
Yeah.
But it was interesting they took that idea. Now, the Black Coat submersible, like it has multiple people and it's much bigger. It's far more sophisticated. But I mean, I would like to think they thought of the turtle because that'd be a cool little sort of historical shout out to kind of sort of a more sophisticated version of that here, essentially. But this I want to read the rest because this really intrigued me.
Oh yeah,
and the dialogue, as you write more, that you can easily see that becoming crisper.
Sure, and I mean, especially for something exactly what you said, Chris. Like this is their first, out of the gate. And I mean, for somebody like Ben Licious, I'm sure that with time, I mean, as is the case with every single writer, practice makes perfect. So that if this is his first comic out of the gate, then by the time that
this is an extremely first comic out of the gate.
Absolutely.
The overall package. Oh my God,
100%. Yeah. So I'm intrigued to see where the rest of this goes, and if I can track down the other ones, I'll give it a shot.
Ian, is there anything online? Did they do anything after the Blackest Eye, or is that the last thing that appears in media? Essentially,
I think it's the last because I'm really not seeing even anything about Ben Licious himself online. Okay. So I think this might be one of those ones that that's just sort of it languished on the line a little bit since coming out.
So it's so goddamn hard to maintain an independent comic. Oh man,
yeah, I hear that. Yeah. Yeah, even on Comixology, Ben Licious has 3 comics on there, none of which are related. So that's the only things that I see on the internet as of this point.
All right.
Yep. But no, Mert, I'm glad that you that you picked this one as the independent because this was something that I missed back in 2006, and I'm glad to give it a shot.
Yeah, it was just something that, the standard procedure for the introducing is 3 different characters with some kind of common thread from 3 decades and 3 publishers. And this was the best. For a while there, I was kind of stuck on Rebels from Dark Horse, which I know Chris was thrilled to talk about again, and which we should recommend again for anyone who's jonesing for some good Revolutionary War era graphic fiction.
Yep,
because it was excellent. But I was thinking of more something that we hadn't talked about recently, and this was what came to mind. And as we've said, it did get a lot of play on CGS a decade and a half ago, but there are a lot of listeners who weren't around for that. So it would be nice to revive discussion of the Black Coat for purposes of this introducing episode, which is a salute to that to the War for American Independence.
And Murd, 3 great selections, outstanding, bravo.
Yep.
I'm glad you mentioned Rebels though, because if you want to read really well researched, authentic takes in comic form on aspects of the American Revolution, go get Rebels. That's a stellar book.
Yeah, I haven't read Rebels, so I'm adding that to the pile.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's also nice, Murd, on an episode that's so steeped on American history to bring up some CGS history in the process.
Right?
Absolutely.
15 years, baby, 15 years.
Heck yeah, and still counting.
Unreal.
Now, before we conclude this episode, I just wanted to bring up in passing, since it did happen a few days ago, the passing of Mr. Joe Sinnott. As you know, I talk about a man.
Well, and our next comic talk, we should talk about him and Denny O'Neil at some length.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. We did republish for Denny O'Neil the wonderful panel that Jamie D got to run with Denny at Denver Comic-Con. So anybody who hasn't checked that out, that's on the feed right before our top 5 supporting characters. So do check that out. It's a wonderful, wonderful piece of history that we were glad to re-release for all you folks out there.
Yeah, and we'll have plenty to say about both Denny O'Neil and Joe Sinnott.
Yep.
In a future comic talk. Two giants in the industry.
No question about that. Yep.
And we should thank listeners who have been donated to the show. That's always appreciated, and we continue to see those donations coming in, and it really helps us keep the show going. So, again, thank you.
Yep, 100%. And for that matter, as we are here in July, I'll just yet again, put out there that hope everybody's staying safe, and that anybody who is still stuck inside one way or another, here's hoping that our episodes continue to give you something to look forward to every single week.
Hear, hear.
Alrighty. I think we're pretty much ready to go.
But Shane's not here. Who's going to read it?
Standing by.
I guess it's just going to have to be Murd. All right. Well, let's cue that sucker up. Ready. Yep, hold on. 1 second. There we go.
If you'd like to send us an email, you can reach us at comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. If you'd rather leave a voicemail, you can call 267-702-6642. You can like us on Facebook and also participate at our comic Geek Speak super group on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @comicgeekspeak. We do still have a forum. It's at thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com, where you can leave feedback about this and many other episodes of our podcast, and just engage your fellow geeks and CGS listeners in conversation. We would, as Chris mentioned, like to give special thanks to those of you who have donated to support the show, either recently or in the more distant past, especially here in these troubled times. We really do appreciate it, and the show would not be what it is today without your support. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. If he's led to a fight and a duel is due, then the red and the white and the blue will come through when Captain America throws his mighty shield.
Thumbs up, soldier.
Oh, Jamie is chuckling somewhere at that.
Oh, you know it.